when my son Jason shouted, "Either you work as Tiffany's housekeeper or you pack your bags and find a shelter." I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just smiled, picked up my purse, and walked out, leaving behind the luxury mansion whose mortgage I'd paid off in full, the house that was still legally mine. He expected tears. He expected me to grovel like I always had. But this time, something was different. A week later, he had 23 missed calls on my phone, and that was just the beginning of my plan. They would regret every cruel word and every heartless act. But before we get into the story, please support us by liking and subscribing right now. I also want to say hi. Leave your name, city, and the word present in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from, even in faraway places. Now let me tell you everything. My shopping list was still in my coat pocket when I pushed through the front door of the mansion, arms loaded with grocery bags. The late Tuesday afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen windows, making everything look warm and golden. Normally that made me happy. Not today. Tiffany sat at the dining table, painting her nails a bright coral pink. Her bare feet rested on the chair I'd bought with money from my late husband Bob's life insurance. The nail polish bottle sat open, the chemical smell filling the entire space. She didn't even look up when she spoke. "Hey, make me a sandwich while you're in there." I set the heavy bags down carefully on the counter. My arms ached from climbing 3 flights of stairs with milk, bread, and fresh produce. The plastic handles had left red marks across my palms. "Excuse me?" I said. "Did you hear me?" Tiffany replied, still focused on her nails. "Turkey and Swiss, not that cheap deli meat you eat. Something good." Something cold and hard settled in my chest. I had bought that expensive turkey just for her and Jason. I'd spent my entire Social Security check on groceries I couldn't afford. "Tiffany, I just got home. I need to put the groceries away first." Then she looked at me with that expression that always made me feel small and stupid. "What's the problem? You're already standing there. I'm busy with my nails." The problem was that this was my house, and I was tired of being treated like hired help. Tiffany held her hands up to let the polish dry. "Look, Martha, you live in our house now. We let you stay because you help out." The word "let" hit me like a slap. I had been paying every bill for 8 months while they claimed to be job hunting. I was the one buying groceries while they spent their money on country club dinners and weekend trips to the Outer Banks. Tiffany stood up and took a step toward me. At 28, she was taller and stronger than me, but I'd dealt with cruel people long before she was born. "Jason and I have been talking," she said. "If you want to keep living here in peace, you need to pull your weight more. It's that simple." The front door opened. My son Jason appeared with his laptop bag, tired from his half-day shift at a marketing firm downtown. He saw Tiffany standing over me and sensed the tension in the air. "What's going on here?" he asked with irritation, as if I were the problem. "Your mother is being difficult," Tiffany said without moving. "I asked her to make me a sandwich, and she's acting like it's some huge drama." Jason looked at me with disappointment, the same look he used to give me as a teenager when he didn't get his way. "Mom, just make her the sandwich. It's not worth fighting over." But Tiffany wasn't finished. She moved even closer, so close I could smell her perfume mixed with the nail polish. "This is how things work," she said. "You live in our house, you help us. That means when I ask you for something, you do it. No questions, no attitude." My voice stayed calm, though my heart was pounding. "She's right," Jason said, positioning himself next to his wife like they were a team against me. "Mom, you need to decide right now. Either you help Tiffany and do what she asks, or you pack your things and leave." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. I looked at my son, searching for some trace of the little boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares. All I saw was Tiffany's hard expression reflected in his face. "Okay," I said quietly. Tiffany smiled, convinced she'd won. "Good. So about that sandwich, I'm going to pack," I said. The smile vanished from her face. Jason's mouth fell open, clearly expecting me to apologize and shuffle into the kitchen like a beaten dog. I turned toward the hallway, leaving the grocery bags exactly where they stood. Behind me, I heard Tiffany gasp and Jason whisper, "Mom, wait." Yes. But I was already walking toward my bedroom, my steps firm on the carpet that Jason and I had picked out together when he first moved in. The suitcase came down from the closet with a soft thud. I'd bought it for a trip to Florida with my sister when Bob was still alive and money wasn't so tight. Now it lay open on the bed, ready to hold what little remained of my life in this house. I packed carefully. Underwear, socks, a change of clothes. Not everything, just what I needed. From the living room came muffled voices and arguing. Tiffany's voice rising in pitch, Jason sounding increasingly nervous. They were trying to figure out what to do with the old woman who had finally said no. My hands moved on autopilot, folding dresses, rolling stockings. The photo of Bob went into the side pocket, wrapped in tissue paper. My medications, my reading glasses, the small notebook where I tracked every dollar I spent. When I rolled the suitcase down the hallway, they stopped talking. Tiffany sat back down at the table, but she wasn't the same anymore. She looked worried, her eyes moist. Jason stood by the kitchen with his arms crossed, trying to look angry, but mostly appearing confused. Neither of them said goodbye. My old Honda started on the first try, reliable as always. I pulled out of the driveway without looking up at the window of the third-floor bedroom. The 20-minute drive to Sunset Residences on the edge of town gave me time to think. Memories hit me as I drove through downtown Charlotte. Jason's daycare when he was little, $200 a week for 2 years while I worked double shifts at a diner. I'd come home so tired my feet would swell every night. His high school graduation party cost me $8,000 because he wanted something special for his friends. Then came college, public university, yes, but between tuition, materials, transportation, and rent near campus, it was nearly $30,000 a year because Jason said he needed the full experience. I cleaned offices at night, mopping floors and emptying trash cans while other grandmothers were home watching TV. His wedding to Tiffany cost $80,000. Her family said they were too busy to help, so I covered everything in silence. The flowers, the cake, the venue, everything had to be perfect for my son's big day. Then came the house problems. $3,600 a month in mortgage payments because young couples need help getting started. That's what mothers do, I told myself. That's what Jason's father would have wanted. The monthly bills arrived one after another, punctual as clockwork. $30,600 for the mortgage, $800 for utilities, $1,200 for groceries when money got tight. My pension dissolved into their lives, dollar by dollar, and I convinced myself that was love. Sunset Residences sat at the end of the avenue, a white, clean building with a sign reading Extended Stay Suites. The room was small but decent. A bed, a chair, a little table by the window. I set the suitcase on the stand and sat heavily on the bed. The silence here was different. Not the comfortable silence of my own space, but the emptiness of a place where nobody knew me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. The bank, insurance, credit cards, numbers I'd memorized after so many years of watching every penny. It was Tuesday. Some things could still be done. Some calls could still be made. I powered up the tablet on the little table and logged into my bank account. The numbers glowed on the screen. Checking account, savings, retirement fund. Numbers that represented a lifetime of hard work, of giving up small pleasures to care for my family. The cursor blinked, waiting for me to decide the next step. Friends, every story I tell you is released every day. But YouTube will only show them to you if you tap the red subscribe button. Please do it now while I'm speaking. Tap subscribe, turn on notifications, and you'll never miss a story. Have you done it yet? Thank you. Wednesday morning dawned gray and cloudy, matching how I felt inside. I spread my papers across the hotel table like a general planning a war. Bank statements, insurance policies, legal documents, Everything in order. The first call was to First National Bank of North Carolina. "Good morning, Mrs. Martha Henderson," said the woman on the other end, after I'd pressed all the correct options. "How can we help you today?" "I need to stop the automatic mortgage payment for the property at 847 Magnolia Drive. Account ending in 7829. I heard the clicking of keys. "Ma'am, I see that payment has been going out for 8 months. Are you sure you want to cancel it?" "Completely sure. May I ask the reason?" "The occupants can no longer count on my financial assistance." More typing. "Very well, Mrs. Henderson. The automatic payment will stop immediately. You'll receive a confirmation letter in 3 business days." The second call was simpler. The phone company had been covering both their cell phones under my family plan for 6 months. Tiffany's iPhone, Jason's Android. $480 a month for phones I never used, bills for calls I never made. "I need to remove 2 lines from my family plan," I told the agent. "My son and daughter-in-law need to get their own service starting now." "When would you like this to take effect?" "Today." The credit cards took longer. Jason was an authorized user on 2 of my cards, a Visa and a department store card. $1,600 a month I'd been paying for things I never bought. "Mrs. Henderson," explained the woman from Visa, "removing authorized users means they'll have to apply for their own cards. Any pending balance will remain your responsibility, but they won't be able to spend any more." "I understand. Remove them immediately." Each call felt like removing heavy chains from my body. 35 years working as a waitress had taught me how systems worked, what words to use, how to get things done. Everything I was doing was completely legal and within my rights. The life insurance change required mailing documents, but I started the process. $500,000 that had been designated for Jason, money I'd saved to protect my family's future. But now the word family meant something different. By lunchtime, I'd made 6 calls, automatic payments canceled, phone service terminated, cards blocked. All the automatic money that had been draining my accounts for months ended with polite conversations and reference numbers. I leaned back in the cheap hotel chair and looked at my notes. Reference numbers, confirmation codes, exact dates when everything would stop. The paper trail of my independence. My phone sat silent on the table. Not one missed call, not one urgent text. They didn't know yet. They probably wouldn't realize until the first payment didn't go through, until the first bill arrived with their names instead of mine. But they would know very soon. I closed the tablet and walked to the window. Across the parking lot, an elderly man helped his wife into the car, holding her arm carefully as she settled in. Maybe they were visiting family, or maybe going to the doctor. I envied that companionship, the way they cared for each other with patience and tenderness. Bob and I had been like that once. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I let it ring. The week passed in silence for me, but clearly not for them. I'd settled into a routine at Sunset Residences. Coffee in the lobby. Breakfast at the diner across the street. Long walks through the quiet neighborhoods of Charlotte. My phone started accumulating missed calls like autumn leaves. By Thursday, there were 9 messages. By Saturday, 18. I listened to them in order, watching them progress from confusion to anger, and then to desperation. The first ones were almost casual. Jason asking if there was some mistake with the mortgage payment. Tiffany, leaving short, annoyed messages about the suspended phone service. But by Friday, panic had set in. "Mom, what the hell is happening?" Jason's voice cracked with worry. "The bank says you canceled the payment. They want the full amount by Monday, or we're getting evicted." Tiffany's messages grew increasingly cruel. "Martha, you need to fix this right now. People are asking about our bills. You're making us look like we can't support ourselves." The most recent calls sounded like begging. Jason crying, promising they'd find a solution if I'd just call back. Tiffany trying to be sweet, saying she was sorry for being harsh and wanted to work things out. I deleted each message after listening, feeling only a quiet curiosity at their growing desperation. Friday afternoon, someone knocked on my hotel room door. Through the peephole, I saw them both. Jason in his work clothes, Tiffany in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, both looking like they hadn't slept well. I opened the door but didn't let them in. "Mom." Jason's eyes were red and swollen. His usual confidence had vanished. "We need to talk." "Talk about what?" "About you trying to ruin our lives over a stupid fight about a sandwich." Tiffany pushed forward, her face red with anger. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said calmly. "I'm simply no longer paying for your lives." "The mortgage, Mom." Jason's voice rose. "You can't just stop paying it. That's our home." "Actually," I responded, "it's my money paying for your home. My name is on the bank account. My signature on the payments. You were just guests." Tiffany grabbed Jason's arm as he stepped toward the door. "Mom, please, can we fix this? Jessica was wrong to talk to you that way," Jason said. "We both were, but you can't just abandon us without warning, without talking about it." "You gave me an ultimatum," I reminded him. "Do what Tiffany says or leave. Those were your exact words." "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did." I looked at my son and saw a stranger wearing his face. "You meant every word. You just didn't think I'd choose to leave." Tiffany changed strategies, artificially softening her voice. "Look, we all said things we regret, but you're talking about our home, our credit, our entire future. You can't just take everything away like it's nothing." "Yes, I can, and I already did." I started to close the door. "You wanted me gone. I'm gone. You wanted to handle your own lives. Now you can." "Mom, wait." Jason's voice broke. "What about family? Everything we've shared together?" I stopped, looking at his desperate face. For a moment, I remembered the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who brought me drawings from school. But that boy had grown into a man capable of standing silent while his wife treated his mother like a servant in her own home. "Family works both ways, son," I said quietly. "I spent 8 months taking care of both of you. When the time came for you to take care of me, you chose her demands over my dignity." Tiffany's fake sweetness cracked. "You're crazy, you old woman. You can't—" "I can call security if you keep yelling," I interrupted. "This is private property, and you're disturbing other guests." They stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Not the kind-hearted mother, not the future grandmother, not the ATM with legs, just a woman who had finally learned to say no. Tiffany grabbed Jason's elbow. "Let's go. We'll figure this out ourselves." They walked back to their car, Tiffany's haughty attitude replaced by a hunched, worried posture. Jason looked back at me over his shoulder as if seeing a stranger. I watched them drive away, then closed the door and returned to my table with the tablet. There were still calls to make, accounts to close. The work of ending a one-sided relationship was far from over. I needed coffee and time to think clearly. The diner on Elm Street had always been my refuge when Bob was still alive. We'd meet there after work and share a slice of chocolate cake while talking about our day. Thursday of the following week, I walked the usual 2 blocks, my breath visible in the cool mountain air. The routine felt comforting after yesterday's confrontation. That morning, I'd reorganized my papers again, reviewing account statements and confirmation numbers like a general studying battle plans. The diner's bell chimed when I entered. The smell of coffee and bacon created that cloud of normalcy I so desperately needed. I'd barely sat down at my corner table when a familiar voice called out, "Martha Henderson, well, look who's here." Linda Moore stood up from a table near the door, newspaper folded under her arm. We'd worked together for 12 years at the Blue Ridge Diner before she retired and moved to the senior apartments. Linda had worked the morning shift, and I'd worked afternoons, but we'd shared enough coffee breaks to become good friends. "Linda?" I stood to hug her. "So good to see you." "Mind if I join you? I haven't seen you since Bob's funeral." She slid into the seat across from me without waiting for an answer. "I heard you moved to Sunset Residences. Is everything okay?" The waitress brought coffee before I could answer. I used the pause to think about how much to tell. Linda was trustworthy, but also the biggest gossip in town. Family stuff, I said finally. I needed space to clear my head. Linda nodded slowly, studying my face. Your daughter-in-law tried to return expensive makeup at Walgreens last month. My grandson works there. My cup stopped halfway to my mouth. What kind of makeup? The expensive kind they keep behind the counter, about $800 worth. But when they checked the receipt, it was paid for with a card that had your name on it. The diner noise seemed to fade. My credit card. That's right. She said it was a gift from you, but Jimmy, my grandson, said she looked nervous, like she was lying. I set the cup down carefully, processing this new information. When exactly did this happen? About 2 or 3 weeks ago, Jimmy handled the return himself because of the amount. My mind started racing. 3 weeks ago, Tiffany had been using my card to buy expensive makeup and return it for cash. This wasn't just me paying their bills anymore. This was deliberate theft. Did they give her the money? Jimmy said yes. Store policy is cash refund if it's within 30 days. Linda leaned toward me, lowering her voice. But that's not all that caught Jimmy's attention. She was asking about other high-end products, like she was planning to come back. The implications hit me like ice water. 2 weeks ago, Tiffany was already planning to steal more from me. This wasn't desperation about the current situation. This was calculated theft that had been happening for who knows how long. Jimmy reported it. They noted it in the system and kept copies of everything. Technically, since the card wasn't reported stolen, it's a gray area, but Jimmy kept the records just in case. Linda watched me carefully. You really didn't know about any of this? I shook my head, thinking about all those monthly credit card bills, all those dinners where Jason complained about money problems while Tiffany was secretly robbing me. What did she want the cash for? Linda looked around the diner and leaned closer. Word around town is Tiffany's been looking at cars, expensive ones. Sarah from the auto lot mentioned a young woman matching her description was looking at vehicles she couldn't afford. I remembered Sarah Jimenez. We'd worked together on the library fundraising committee, and her daughter had gone to school with Jason. If Sarah had information about Tiffany shopping for cars, it was probably true. Linda, thank you for telling me. I pulled out my wallet to pay for the coffee I'd barely touched. Martha, be careful. A woman who steals from her own family might do other desperate things when she feels cornered. I walked back to Sunset Residences, my mind whirling. Tiffany's sandwich demand and her rudeness suddenly made sense. She'd been stealing from me for weeks, treating me like a personal bank account she could access whenever she wanted. The ultimatum wasn't about respect. It was about maintaining control of the money she believed she had a right to take. Back in my hotel room, I opened the tablet and created a new document titled Evidence, Tiffany Barnes. Linda's information was just the beginning. If Tiffany had lied about this, what else had she been hiding? The police station was only 6 blocks away. I had 2 hours before they closed for the day. After lunch, I drove straight from the diner to the Charlotte Police Department, a modern brick building that used to intimidate me when I was young, but now felt like an ally. At the reception desk, a young officer took my complaint with professional attention. Mrs. Henderson, you're saying your daughter-in-law used your credit card without permission? He looked at the Walgreens receipt Linda had gotten for me, comparing it to my bank statement. Yes, I never gave her permission to use my card, and I never authorized those purchases. What kind of purchases are we talking about? I'd prepared for this question. Makeup returned for cash. According to the store employee, she was also asking about other expensive items she could return later for money. He stamped the papers with official authority. This constitutes credit card fraud. We'll need to contact the store for security footage and transaction records. How long will that take? Detective Martinez handles financial crimes. She'll probably want to interview you within 48 hours. I thanked him and collected my copies, feeling the weight of legal authority backing my actions. The stealing was over. The emotional manipulation was over. Now everything would go through proper channels. My next stop was First National Bank. Detective Martinez's office was in the downtown branch, a narrow space filled with filing cabinets and printed sheets. Detective Martinez was younger than I expected, but her handshake was firm and confident. "Mrs. Henderson, what brings you in today?" "Credit card fraud. My daughter-in-law has been using my card without permission and converting purchases into cash." I explained the situation briefly. The ultimatum, my leaving the house, discovering Tiffany's unauthorized spending. Detective Martinez listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. "Tiffany Barnes is already known to some local merchants," she said when I finished. "Several stores have reported suspicious returns over the past month. Always expensive items, always returned for cash." "How much money are we talking about?" "Different stores, different amounts. From what we've traced so far, probably between $3,200 and $4,000 total." The figures left me cold. Tiffany had been living in my house, eating my food, demanding my service, while secretly stealing enough to cover a car payment. "What kind of stores?" "A mix. Pharmacies, department stores, electronics shops, places that sell expensive, easy-to-return items." The detective shrugged. "The pattern suggests someone was gathering cash for a large purchase." "How long has this been going on?" "About a month. Most stores keep footage for 90 days, so we have good evidence. Mrs. Henderson, this is definitely criminal fraud." I left the police station with a much clearer picture of my daughter-in-law's activities. The theft explained her confidence, her attempts to control me with ultimatums, and her escalating demands. I wasn't just a convenient money source. I was her primary target. That night I sat in the hotel room reviewing the day's discoveries. Police report filed. Investigation initiated. Confirmation of Tiffany's theft and fraudulent activities. A growing network of professional allies who understood the real situation. I opened the tablet and updated my evidence file, adding Detective Martinez's information to what Linda Moore had discovered. Recognizing patterns had been a crucial skill during my diner years. The patterns here were becoming crystal clear. Tiffany wasn't just disrespectful or spoiled, she was a thief, a liar, and dangerous. The more pressure she felt, the more reckless she'd become. I needed to be prepared for what came next. If you want to know how this story ends and discover many more, hit the red subscribe button. It's free, and it helps me a lot. The next day, I would start making strategic calls, not to get Jason in trouble, but to make sure people knew about potential financial difficulties that might affect his work performance. The truth was always the best protection. In a town like Charlotte, information travels fast. By Monday, I knew it was time to tell my side of the story. My first encounter happened at the grocery store when Mrs. Chen from the church baking committee cornered me near the bread aisle. She was one of those women who knew everything about everyone and wasn't afraid to ask direct questions. "Martha, dear, I've heard some troubling things about family problems. Are you all right?" I thought carefully about my response. Mrs. Chen would repeat whatever I said to at least 20 people before Wednesday's service. Jason and Tiffany asked me to leave, so I did. Sometimes adult children need to learn to be responsible for their own obligations. Her eyebrows shot up. "They asked you to leave the house you were paying for?" "It seemed like the best solution for everyone." "But didn't you pay for Jason's college and help them when they got married?" She leaned toward me, lowering her voice. "I always wondered how they could afford that beautiful house on his part-time salary." I nodded, but didn't elaborate. The facts would speak for themselves. My next stop was the Blue Ridge Diner, where I'd worked 15 years before retiring. Tom Mendez, the owner's son, looked up from receipts with genuine concern. "Martha, I heard you're staying at Sunset Residences. What's going on?" 3 other employees gathered as I briefly explained the situation. Their reactions were immediate and unanimous, shocked that Tiffany had treated me with such disrespect, angry to learn I'd been supporting them financially for months without receiving any gratitude. "You paid for Jason's college," said Sarah, the morning shift manager, shaking her head in disbelief. "He always said his family was helping him out." "He said you were the one getting a favor by living with them," Tom added, his expression darkening. Jason said a lot of things that weren't true, I replied calmly. That explains why Tiffany always seemed to have money for expensive clothes. But Jason never took extra shifts when we offered them, Lisa murmured from behind the counter. When I left the diner, I knew the real story would be all over town within hours. The network in a small town like Charlotte was more efficient than any newspaper. My third stop was St. Paul's Methodist Church, where Pastor John Rodriguez was preparing for the evening service. He invited me into his office, offering tea and a chair that had consoled many parishioners in difficult times. Martha, several people have told me they're worried about you. Can you help me understand what's happening? I appreciated his direct approach. He wasn't looking for gossip. He wanted to help someone in his community. Pastor, I've been financially supporting my son and daughter-in-law for 8 months. Last week, they made it clear my presence in the house depended on obeying Tiffany's orders. I chose to leave rather than accept that. That must have been very painful. It was revealing, I answered honestly. I love my son, but I'm not going to let someone who's been stealing from me treat me like a servant. The pastor nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes, loving someone means letting them face the consequences of their decisions. It seems like you've protected them from those consequences for a long time. Too long, I admitted. Back at the hotel, I stopped at Corner Coffee for an afternoon latte. The place was packed with the usual Monday crowd: retirees, off-duty workers, mothers with small children. I found a small table in the back and listened to the conversations around me. They say Tiffany's been returning expensive makeup for cash. Martha Henderson was paying their rent for months. I always thought it was strange how well they lived on Jason's coffee shop salary. The information was spreading exactly as I'd anticipated. Small towns function like living organisms. They process information quickly and separate truth from lies through collective wisdom. My phone rang as I was leaving the cafe. It was Betty Morales, my neighbor from the old building. Martha, I hope I'm not bothering you. I wanted to tell you there's been a lot of arguing in your old apartment lately. Mostly Tiffany yelling, but Jason too. Yesterday morning there was a police car outside for almost an hour. Thanks for letting me know, Betty. I appreciate you keeping me informed. Are you sure you're safe where you are? Do you need anything? The genuine concern in her voice reminded me that community support took many forms. I'm fine, thank you, taking it day by day. That evening I sat in the hotel room, reviewing the day's conversations. Social pressure was building naturally, without any vengeful effort on my part. People simply recognized injustice when they saw it clearly. My phone rang again. Unknown number. But I recognized the area code, probably one of Jason's creditors. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. This is Karen Avila from Charlotte Credit Union. We're trying to reach Jason Henderson about an overdue personal loan. Please contact us as soon as possible. They were calling me because Jason had probably listed my address as his residence on credit applications. More evidence of deception. More proof that he planned to make me responsible for his debts without telling me. I deleted the message and opened the tablet. It was time to update my evidence file with today's findings. I should have expected them to fight back. Tiffany was never one to accept consequences quietly. Tuesday morning started peacefully. I was reviewing my bank statements with coffee when my phone started ringing nonstop. First Tom, then Mrs. Chen, then Pastor Rodriguez. Each call brought the same disturbing news. Tiffany was going around town spreading her own version of events. Martha, I think you need to know what she's saying, Tom said, his voice heavy with anger. She came in here about an hour ago, talking loudly so everyone could hear, saying you abandoned them without warning, claims you promised to support them forever and changed your mind out of jealousy. What exactly did she say? That you're having some kind of breakdown. That you kicked them out because Jason wouldn't let you control every decision in their relationship. He paused. She also says there's a family medical emergency that requires money and you're refusing to help. I thanked Tom and hung up. My mind was already assessing the implications. Tiffany was desperate enough to launch a public campaign. That meant the pressure from losing my financial support was becoming intense. The next call confirmed my suspicions. Mrs. Henderson, this is Detective Martinez. I wanted to give you a heads up. Tiffany Barnes was here this morning filing an elder abuse complaint. Elder abuse? She claims someone at the bank is manipulating you into making bad financial decisions. Elder abuse? Complete nonsense, of course, but she's trying to create an official record that you're mentally incompetent. I told her she'd need medical documentation and witnesses, which she clearly can't provide. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Jason's number. "Mom, please answer," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know you're upset, but there are things you don't understand." Truth or lie, I no longer knew what to believe. "Jessica is pregnant, Mom. All this stress is making her really sick. The doctor says if things don't calm down soon, she might lose the baby." I felt that familiar tug in my stomach, the same protective instinct that had made me vulnerable to their manipulation for months. But something in his tone sounded rehearsed, desperate, yes, but in a calculated way. "Congratulations on the pregnancy, son," I said softly. "When did you find out?" "About 2 weeks ago, right before everything fell apart." His voice broke convincingly. "Mom, I can't let Tiffany lose our baby over money problems. You always said family comes first." "Family does come first. That's why I spent $60,000 on your education and $80,000 on your wedding. And now what about your grandchild?" The question hung between us. If Tiffany really was pregnant, if there truly was a medical crisis, then my decisions might affect an innocent baby. But the timing was too convenient, the emotional manipulation too polished. "Jason, have you seen a doctor about these pregnancy complications?" "We have an appointment next week." "With which doctor?" "Dr. Fernanda Ruiz at the Women's Clinic." I knew Dr. Ruiz. My sister had been her patient during her pregnancy. "I'm going to call her office to see how I can help with medical expenses." "Mom, you don't need to call. If there's a real medical emergency involving my grandchild, I want to help. The doctor will know the best way to handle payments." Jason's voice turned sharp. "You can't call Tiffany's doctor. That's private information." "You're right," I responded. "Then have her call me directly to discuss payment options." The call ended abruptly. An hour later, I was walking through downtown when I ran into Tiffany outside the bank. She was talking loudly to anyone who would listen, with that aggressive edge I'd learned to recognize. "She lost her mind," Tiffany was saying to a small group waiting for the bus. "Crazy old woman who thinks everyone's trying to rob her, kicked out her own pregnant daughter-in-law for nothing." I approached calmly. People saw me before Tiffany noticed. Faces turned toward me, expressions changing as they recognized the person she was talking about. Tiffany spun around, her face red with rage. "There she is, the woman who abandoned her own family." "Hello, Tiffany," I said in a firm voice. "How's the credit card fraud case going?" The accusation hit her like a physical blow. Several people in the group began murmuring, the puzzle pieces clicking into place. "You're crazy," she stammered. "I don't know what you're talking about." $3,200 in fraudulent returns, I responded, according to Detective Martinez. Walgreens and Belk department store. Expensive items returned for cash. I looked at the gathered group. It's impressive how much someone can steal when they're not paying their own rent. Tiffany's face went from red to purple. She moved closer, using her height as a weapon. "I can document every dollar I spent supporting you for 8 months, I interrupted. "Can you document where Jason's salary really went?" People were listening intently. Now, Tiffany understood she'd lost control of the narrative. "Let's go," she growled, pushing through the crowd. "This isn't over." I watched her walk away, noticing how several people pulled out their phones. The real story would be on Facebook within an hour. Back at the hotel, I opened the tablet and started documenting what happened that day. Tiffany's counterattack was failing because it was based on lies that couldn't withstand scrutiny. The community knew me too well to believe stories about mental breakdowns or cruel abandonments. But the pregnancy story worried me. If Tiffany really was pregnant, everything became more complicated. I needed confirmation before taking the next step. I picked up the phone and called Dr. Ruiz's office. If there was a real medical emergency, I would help. But I wouldn't let myself be manipulated with a false crisis. Tiffany's public threats had crossed a line. I returned to my room and called Detective Martinez. "Detective, we need to talk. Tiffany's behavior today shows a pattern of escalation that worries me." "In what way?" "She confronted me in public, made threatening gestures in front of witnesses, and her attitude is that of someone losing control." I looked out the hotel window toward downtown. "I want to file a formal complaint and explore protection options. Come by tomorrow morning. Bring all the documentation you have." But I didn't have to wait until morning. Miguel Salgado, the night security guard at Sunset Residences, knocked on my door an hour later. "Mrs. Henderson, that young woman who was yelling in the parking lot earlier? She came back about 30 minutes ago, stood outside your door for about 10 minutes, then left. Made several guests nervous." Miguel was a retired police officer. He knew how to recognize trouble before it exploded. "Did she say anything specific?" "Muttered something about teaching old ladies lessons. It's all on the security camera." Security cameras. Physical evidence of Tiffany's threatening behavior on private property. "Miguel, would you be willing to turn that video over to the police?" "Of course. Someone like that shouldn't be intimidating senior residents." The next morning, I arrived at the police station with the security disc and a written timeline of Tiffany's increasingly aggressive behavior. Detective Martinez reviewed everything with professionalism. "Martha, there's a clear pattern of intimidation here, combined with what I witnessed yesterday at the bank. We have grounds for a restraining order." "What would that involve?" "Legal prohibition against Tiffany coming within 300 feet of you or your residence. Any violation means immediate arrest." The detective leaned back in her chair. "Is there anything else I should know?" "Tiffany consulted with a lawyer yesterday about squatters' rights laws." The words chilled my blood. Squatters' rights. Exactly. She was investigating whether she could claim a legal right to stay in your house by having lived there continuously. The detective's expression was grave. Tiffany was looking for legal loopholes to stay, but without a lease, no payments in her name, and with your documentation, her attempt had no real basis. Still, it shows premeditation. She'd been planning for months. Tiffany was planning to claim rights to my own house. "That's right," said Detective Martinez. "But since you've been paying the mortgage and they never signed a lease or paid utilities, there's no legal basis." She pulled out a file folder. "However, this demonstrates premeditation. She's been planning this theft for months. I can expedite the restraining order based on the evidence. You'll have it this afternoon." I left the police station with new understanding of my daughter-in-law's character. The sandwich incident hadn't been an attempt to assert authority. It had been a way to maintain control over someone she planned to systematically rob. Walking back to my car, I pulled out my phone and checked my contacts. It was time to make strategic calls. The first was to Karen Avila from Charlotte Credit Union, one of Jason's creditors who'd been calling my number. "Mrs. Avila, I'm returning your call about Jason Henderson. I need to clarify something important. He no longer lives at my address and has no legal rights to my property. He listed that address as his residence on all his loan applications. He was only a guest in my home. I asked him to leave last week. If you're looking for him, he works at Mountain Coffee on First Street." The second call was to Pacific Collection Services. "This is Martha Henderson. You've been calling about Jason Henderson's debts. I want to clarify that Mr. Henderson has no interest in my property and no longer lives there." Each call was brief and direct. I wasn't paying Jason's debts or sharing personal information, just correcting the false address he'd been using to evade his creditors. By lunchtime, I'd contacted 4 different collection agencies. The house of cards Jason had so carefully built was about to collapse. That afternoon, Judge Morales signed my restraining order. Tiffany Barnes was now legally prohibited from coming within 300 feet of me or my properties. Any violation would mean immediate arrest and possible jail time. I drove back to Sunset Residences with the satisfaction of seeing justice work as it should. Tiffany had spent months planning to take my home using legal technicalities. Now she couldn't even legally approach it. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "This isn't over, old woman." I forwarded the message to Detective Martinez and blocked the number. Collecting evidence had become second nature to me. Wednesday morning, I officially filed the restraining order with the court. By noon, I was watching Tiffany's world begin to collapse from multiple fronts. The court secretary stamped the final copy with official authority. "Mrs. Henderson, this order takes effect immediately. Any contact or approach within 300 feet constitutes a violation." I thanked her and walked to my car, knowing the court officer would serve Tiffany with the documents within hours. My phone was already ringing. "Martha, this is James Mendez from Mountain Coffee." James was Jason's boss, a decent man who'd built his coffee shop on trust and reputation. "I need to ask you something directly. Is what Jason's been saying about you true?" "What has he been saying?" "That you had some kind of mental breakdown and kicked them out because of dementia. That there's a family medical emergency and you're refusing to help out of spite." James's voice sounded skeptical. "Look, Martha, I've known you 15 years. This doesn't sound like the woman who organized the neighborhood Christmas collection every year." "James, Tiffany gave me an ultimatum. Obey her or leave. I chose to leave. There's no medical emergency, and my mental faculties are intact, as my bank, my lawyer, and the police can confirm." There was a long silence. "That's what I was afraid of, Martha. 2 customers came in today saying Tiffany owes them money. One recognized her from an electronics store where she was trying to return expensive items. This is already affecting the business's reputation." "I understand. I'm going to have to let Jason go. I can't allow this kind of controversy with customers who trust us every morning." 20 minutes later, I was having coffee at Corner Coffee when I saw the first debt collector arrive in front of my old apartment building. It was Pacific Collection Services. I recognized the magnet on the door. I'd spoken with them the day before about Jason's false address. My phone rang. It was Jason. "Mom, there are men at the apartment asking about our debts. They want to know about our assets, income, everything." Now his voice showed real panic, not the calculated desperation from before. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that you own the apartment and we don't live there anymore, but they're talking about garnishments, wage attachments." "Son, that happens when someone borrows money they can't repay. Those are consequences you created, not me." "But how much do I owe? How is all this possible?" Then I understood he didn't know the full extent. Personal loans, credit cards, about $12,000 total, according to Detective Martinez. Silence on the other end. Then in a quiet voice, "Tiffany told me those were medical expenses from last year. I'm sorry you're finding out this way, Jason." And a process server came too. He gave Tiffany some legal documents. She's been screaming and throwing things ever since. The restraining order. Tiffany was just understanding that her options had completely run out. "Mom? She says she wants to leave town, that there's nothing left for her here." His voice truly broke this time. What am I supposed to do? Make decisions based on who Tiffany really is, not who you hoped she'd be. That night, I parked across the street from my old building and watched the chaos from a distance. 2 different collection vehicles had come during the day. Betty Morales, the next-door neighbor, waved at me sadly. She'd followed everything as a longtime neighbor. Through the living room window, I saw Jason and Tiffany arguing. He gestured, confused and hurt. She looked desperate and furious. The fantasy marriage, held up by my financial support, was crumbling as it collided with reality. My phone buzzed with a message from Miguel at Sunset Residences. That woman tried to get past reception again. Reminded her about the restraining order. She left, but she was very agitated. I forwarded the message to Detective Martinez. Tiffany was violating the restraining order within hours of being served. Her desperation made her reckless, and that made her dangerous. But it also made her predictable. A desperate woman, in debt, with no income and legal problems, has few options. She could face her responsibilities like an adult or run. From what I'd already learned about Tiffany, running seemed the most likely option. I drove back to Sunset Residences, thinking about the implications. If Tiffany fled town to escape her legal problems, what would happen to Jason? Would he go with her, choosing loyalty to someone who'd deceived him for months? Or would he finally see her clearly and make a different decision? Either way, the consequences were theirs to face. I'd spent 8 months protecting them from reality. That protection ended the day they asked me to choose between my dignity and their demands. I chose dignity. Now they could choose their own path. 2 days of watching their desperation were enough. Thursday morning, I called Jason and asked him to meet me at the diner. Just him. "I can't leave Tiffany alone now, Mom. She's really struggling with everything happening." "Then we have nothing to talk about," I responded. "The restraining order means I can't be near her either." Long silence. "Where do you want to meet?" "Corner coffee at 2 p.m., back table where we can talk privately." I arrived early and chose a table facing away from the street. I wanted the conversation to focus on words, not nervous glances at passing cars. When Jason arrived, he looked older than his 26 years, stress lines around his eyes, nervously fidgeting with his phone. He sat across from me and started talking immediately. "Mom, I know you're angry, but Tiffany lost her job yesterday and debt collectors won't leave us alone. The phone rings every hour. People keep showing up at the apartment demanding money we don't have." I waited for him to finish, then spoke calmly. "I'm giving you one chance to end this with some dignity, Jason." "What do you mean?" "A public acknowledgement of the truth. A complete explanation of how much I've supported you financially and an honest explanation of why I left." His face turned red. "You want me to humiliate myself in front of the whole town?" "I want you to tell the truth. It's not the same thing." "What kind of acknowledgement?" I'd spent 2 days thinking about exactly what justice required. An announcement at church on Sunday during sharing time. A letter to the editor of the Charlotte Tribune. A Facebook post visible to all our acquaintances with complete details. The college, the wedding, the mortgage, and the ultimatum that forced me to leave. "Mom, people will think. People will think you had a mother who loved you enough to sacrifice her retirement security for your happiness, and that you took it for granted until it was gone." Jason stared at his untouched coffee. "And Tiffany?" "Tiffany is no longer part of any equation that includes me. The restraining order is permanent. If you choose to stay married to her, that's your decision. But it means choosing her over any relationship with me. You're asking me to choose between my wife and my mother. I'm asking you to choose between someone who threatened me and someone who raised you. The fact that you see those as equivalent options tells me how far apart we've grown." He was silent for a long time, processing what that meant. "And the house? It was our home, Mom. We built our life there these past months. That house where my grandparents lived, where you and Dad lived, I'm not going to keep supporting that place with my money. I canceled my payments and notified the landlord. From now on, you'll have to work it out with the owner, like any responsible adult." The words hit him like a physical blow. "It's all documented. I canceled automatic payments, removed services in your name, and left written notice with the landlord. There's nothing to transfer. There are limits." I kept my voice soft but firm. "Even if you do everything I'm asking perfectly, the house won't come back to you. This decision is final." "Why?" "Because I need to know that any reconciliation between us, if there is one, is built on love, not expectations of inheritance. For 8 months, you treated me like a convenient ATM. I want to know if there's anything left between us beyond financial dependence." Jason's eyes filled with real tears this time, not the calculated manipulation I'd grown used to. "I'm sorry, Mom, really. I never wanted it to go this far." "Sorry isn't enough anymore, son. The whole town saw how you and Tiffany treated me like a servant in my own home. Saw how you chose her demands over my dignity. Words aren't enough. I need to see actions. 3 months later, I drove past that street by chance. Apartment 3B had new tenants, and for the first time, I felt no guilt, just relief. My peace no longer depended on paying for other people's lives. My own life had settled into quiet routines in the lakeside cabin I bought with money that no longer flowed toward ungrateful dependence. Morning coffee on the porch overlooking the water. Afternoon gardening. Evening reading. Simple pleasures that felt luxurious after months of financial stress and family drama. The cabin was small but perfect for me. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen where I could prepare real meals, and a garden where I could grow my own vegetables. My phone buzzed with a message from Jason. "Mom, I've been in therapy for 3 months, and I'm learning a lot about healthy relationships. Could we get coffee sometime? I'd like to earn back your trust, one honest conversation at a time." I smiled, looking at the lake where a family of ducks swam near the shore. Jason had kept his word about the public acknowledgments. The newspaper letter was clear and honest. The Facebook post received dozens of supportive messages from people who finally understood the real story. More importantly, he was taking responsibility for rebuilding our relationship instead of demanding forgiveness without effort. I replied, "Coffee sounds good. Saturday morning at the diner." His response came immediately. "I'll be there. And Mom, thank you for not giving up on me completely." I set the phone aside and watched the ducks glide across the water with their ducklings following. Sometimes patience and dignity are rewarded, even when the burden seemed endless. The sun set over the mountains, painting the lake gold and pink. In the distance, I could hear children laughing, families building new lives, justice done, dignity preserved. And maybe, just maybe, a son willing to earn back his mother's trust with honest actions instead of emotional manipulation. It had been worth the wait. If you enjoyed this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part impressed you. There's more tomorrow. See you there.